This is Everyday Tension. Real stories based on real experiences about everyday conflicts people rarely talk about. This story was shared anonymously. If you'd like, you can support the channel by liking or subscribing and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Here's what happened.
It started with a TikTok, of all things. I was scrolling one night, feeding the baby, and my whole feed was just babies in the hospital. Tiny little things with tubes in their noses, beeping monitors in the background, exhausted parents with that hollow look in their eyes. RSV, flu, whooping cough. The algorithm had me pegged. I'm a first-time mom, so of course I was watching all the baby stuff, and now it was just serving me nightmare fuel. I get this tight feeling in my chest watching them. My husband Mark would walk in and see me staring at the phone, my face probably pale, and he'd just say, "TikTok hospital tour again?" and take the baby so I could put the phone down and breathe for a second. The thing is, it wasn't irrational. The numbers were bad that year. Our pediatrician had given us the rundown at our 2-month checkup. Her tone serious, but not alarmist. Just facts. She said limiting exposure for the first few months, especially during peak virus season, was the single best thing we could do. Mark and I talked about it that night after the baby, Eliza, was asleep. We were both tired. The deep, bone-aching tired you don't understand until you're in it. The thought of her getting sick, of those little coughs turning into something that could land her in the hospital, it was a physical fear. It sat in my stomach like a stone. So we made a plan. We'd be hermits through the fall and winter. No visits, no outings to crowded places, strict hand washing for anyone who did come over for the essential stuff. For the holidays, we'd stick to our tiny, immediate family-only traditions. Thanksgiving was just us three, maybe a Zoom call with my dad. Christmas Eve was always at our house with Mark's parents, just a quiet dinner. That could stay, but it would be the only exception in a string of quiet months. We felt good about it, in control, like we were doing a right, hard thing to protect our daughter. Telling people was easier than I thought. My dad was immediately on board. "You're the parents, you call the shots," he said over the phone. "I'll see her on the screen until spring, that's fine." My friends, even the ones with kids, were all understanding. They got it. Everyone seemed to get it, except for Linda, Mark's mom. At first, she seemed okay. We called her together on a Sunday afternoon. Mark laid it out, his voice calm and even. "Mom, with everything going around and Eliza being so little, we've decided to really hunker down until she's a bit older and the weather breaks. We're not doing any visits this winter. We'll still see you for Christmas Eve, but that's it for a while." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could picture her in her living room, the one she always kept too warm. "Well, that's very cautious of you," she said finally. Her tone was light, but there was an edge to it, a dismissive edge. We never worried about any of that with Mark. He turned out fine. "We know, Mom," Mark said, squeezing the bridge of his nose. I could see the patience settling over him, the same posture he got when dealing with a difficult client at work. "It's just what we're comfortable with right now." Of course, Linda said. "You have to do what you think is best." We hung up, and I remember feeling a flicker of relief. That went fine, I thought. She took it fine. The reality set in for her about 2 weeks later. The weather turned properly cold, and I guess it clicked that we meant this, that the months were going to pass without her coming over, without her holding the baby. The first sign was a text to Mark. "Just thinking I could come by on a Tuesday afternoon. You'll both be at work. I'll just be with Eliza. No one else around, no germs. Mark showed me the text. We were standing in the kitchen, and he had that look. She doesn't get it, he said, flatly. You have to tell her no again, I said. I was bouncing Eliza on my hip, trying to get her to burp. Clearly. So he texted back, that doesn't work for us, Mom. We're not having any visitors, period. It's not about you specifically. It's the rule for everyone. Her response was immediate. But I'm not everyone. That was the beginning of the spiral. The texts and calls to Mark became more frequent. They were always to him, never to me. I was just the audience, hearing his half of the conversations from the other room, watching his shoulders tense up. Mom, it's not up for debate. No, I'm not saying you're dirty. It's not about trust, it's about exposure, because that's what her doctor advised. Yes, I am listening. He'd come out of his office after these calls looking drained. She says our boundaries are unjustified, he'd report, his voice tired. She says she knows better because of her job. Linda was a school secretary for 30 years. In her mind, this made her an expert on children's health. She says we're withholding Eliza from her, that we're keeping her from seeing milestones. That one stung. I'd send her pictures and videos almost every day. Little clips of Eliza cooling, of her grabbing a toy, of her sleeping with her arms flung over her head. It felt like a generous stream of updates. But it wasn't the same as being there, in person. To Linda, the digital updates were nothing. They were a consolation prize. The real thing was her physical presence, and we were denying her that. The tension built slowly, like a pressure cooker. Every conversation with her was another turn of the valve. Mark held the line every time. I was grateful for it, truly. I'd heard so many stories of husbands who waffled, who tried to play peacemaker by giving their moms little concessions. Mark never did that. He was a united front with me, and it was the only thing keeping me from feeling completely unmoored. Then, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, it broke. Mark took the call in the living room. I was in the nursery, trying to get Eliza down for a nap that she was fiercely resisting. The door was open, and I could hear his voice, low and strained. Mom, stop. Just stop. That is not what we're doing. Do not bring her mother into this. That is a low blow, and you know it. My blood went cold. I stopped rocking. Eliza, sensing the shift, started to fuss louder. I barely heard her. I walked to the doorway. Mark was pacing, his free hand clenched in a fist. He saw me, and his face was a mask of anger and something else. Pity, maybe. For me, I'm not discussing this further, he said, his voice final. We'll talk when you've calmed down. He hung up. The room was quiet except for Eliza's grizzly. Mark just stood there for a minute, looking at his phone like it was a hostile object. What did she say? My voice sounded small. He let out a long breath. She was going in circles about the visitation again. The usual stuff. Then, she said it was different for her. That she was entitled to be involved because she's the only grandmother Eliza has. The words landed like a physical blow. I actually took a step back, bracing myself against the doorframe. The air left my lungs. He came over, putting his hands on my shoulders. I am so sorry. I told her that was unacceptable. I told her to never say anything like that again. What did she say to that? She backpedaled. Said she was just explaining the difference between men and women's relationships to babies. That women are always more involved than men. And then she said, your mother deserves to be remembered. A horrible, bewildered laugh escaped me. What does that even mean? What is she talking about? I don't know, Mark said, pulling me into a hug. I was stiff in his arms. I don't know. She's not making sense. She's just lashing out. But she was making a terrible, cool kind of sense. She knew. She knew my mother died when I was 8. A sudden, massive heart attack. One day she was helping me with my spelling homework. The next day she was gone. The grief was an old, familiar scar, but becoming a mother had torn it wide open. I missed her with a fresh, agonizing intensity every single day. I'd lie awake nursing Eliza at 3 a.m. and wonder what my mom's advice would be. I'd look at Eliza's face and try to find traces of her. I'd cry in the shower, silent sobs, for the grandmother my daughter would never know, for the mother I needed so badly. Mark knew, a few close friends knew, and Linda knew. I told her myself, years ago, in a moment of vulnerability when Mark and I were engaged. I thought it was a way to bond, and now she'd used it. She'd taken that loss, that permanent, aching absence in my life, and she'd wielded it like a tool to guilt me, to position herself as the sole remaining matriarch, the one whose claim was therefore greater. It's different for her because she's the only grandmother. The implication was clear. My mother was gone, so Linda's role was now paramount. My loss was her leverage. I didn't cry then. I just felt numb, hollowed out. The rest of the day passed in a blur. We had a quiet Thanksgiving, just the 3 of us. I was mechanically grateful for our health, for our baby, for Mark. But underneath it all was this cold, heavy sadness. It wasn't just the insult, though that was deep and personal. It was the realization of what it meant. This wasn't just a disagreement about germs. This was who she was. When pressed, when denied something she wanted, she would reach for the most painful thing she could find and use it to bludgeon us into compliance. Mark and I didn't need a long discussion. We were on the same page, a page that had been written in that moment. The Christmas Eve plan was canceled. He sent her a brief email. It said that her comments were hurtful and unacceptable, that we needed space, and that we would not be in contact for the foreseeable future. He blocked her number on his phone. He asked me to do the same. I did. But I didn't block her email. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me needed to see if there would be an apology, a real one. It came the next day. It was long. It was full of justifications. She was stressed. She was missing her granddaughter. She didn't mean it that way. She was just explaining how grandmothers feel. She was sure my wonderful mother was looking down on us. It was all word salad. Circling around the one thing she never said, I was wrong to use your trauma against you. I am sorry. I didn't reply. Mark didn't reply. The silence stretched through December. The holidays came and went, quieter than we'd ever planned. It was peaceful, in a way. No anxiety about a visit, no walking on eggshells, just us. But the peace had a cost. Now it's January. The winter is long and dark. Eliza is growing so fast. She's starting to smile socially, a real gummy grin that lights up her whole face. I take a video of it, and my finger hovers over the share button. The old habit is there. Send it to Grandma, but there's no one to send it to. That's the weight that sits on me now. It's a double grief. I'm grieving the mother I lost all over again, because Linda's words made the absence feel new and sharp. And I'm grieving the grandmother I'd hoped Eliza would have. Not Linda as she is, but the idea of a grandmother. Someone who would be kind, who would babysit sometimes, who would love her without conditions or guilt. Someone she could run to when she was mad at me. That's gone. Even if contact resumes one day, that trust is shattered. I will never leave my daughter alone with her. I will never be able to relax in her presence. The relationship is broken, and for what? Because we wanted to keep a newborn safe during flu season. Sometimes I look at Eliza and feel a pang of guilt. Does she sense the absence? Is she missing out on something essential? Logically, I know a baby doesn't need a grandmother. She needs safe, loving parents, and she has that. But the feeling persists. It's the ghost of the family I pictured, the one with two sets of grandparents doting on her. One set is just a photograph and stories. The other is alive, but silent and seething somewhere on the other side of town. Mark doesn't talk about it much. He gets quiet when his phone rings from an unknown number. He checks the mailbox quickly. He's protecting us, holding the boundary firm. I love him for it, but I see the sadness in him too. It's his mother. However difficult she is, she's his mom. This isn't easy for him either. We just don't say it out loud. We focus on Eliza, on work, on the mundane details of our life. We are a team, a fortress. But even fortresses feel the cold wind. So I move through the days. I change diapers. I puree vegetables. I wash endless tiny socks. I watch the TikToks of sick babies less now. The immediate fear has subsided, replaced by this duller, more chronic ache. The conflict isn't loud anymore. The immediate fear has subsided, replaced by this duller, more chronic ache. The conflict isn't loud anymore. There are no more screaming phone calls. It's just quiet. It's the quiet of a relationship that is ruptured. It's the quiet of my daughter's nursery, where I rock her and whisper stories about my mom, trying to make her real through words, because that's all I have. And it's the heavy, waiting quiet of an inbox where no real apology will ever come.